We know that Maria Butina, the convicted Russian agent, is in a bad way legally because of her attempts during the last election to get involved in things by going to politicians' speeches, talking with them, taking photos with them, and also, as we know, attending the national prayer breakfast, as well as a number of other Russians as well, who apparently were here to attempt to get involved and change the course of either the election, US policy, things like that. Well, now TYT Investigates has turned up strong financial evidence that a Christian charity spent a significant amount of money for Russian guests, including Maria Butina, to attend that national prayer breakfast in at least one, although possibly multiple years. So let's talk about this process. The FBI says that Maria Butina and her handler, widely reported to be Alexander Torshin, a Russian official said to be close to President Vladimir Putin, attended the breakfast to influence US politics. Tax records reviewed by TYT represent the first indication they may have received direct financial support in their efforts.
So can I just pause there for a second, John? I want people to understand. So first of all, the FBI got Butina, and so she's got a plea deal. There's a lot of information in the plea deals and the affidavits. Torshin was her handler, and Torshin is one of the top Russian oligarchs, deeply tied to Putin and wanted for money laundering in Spain. So in fact, they got through the prayer breakfast. It appears they got Torshin a meeting with Trump. But then even the Trump White House had to cancel it because they're like, I mean, the guy is wanted for money laundering. We can't meet with a known criminal that our ally is seeking to extradite on these charges. So Torshin is based on the US government's findings and the Spanish government as well, pretty bad guy. The prayer breakfast is having him over quite frequently. Now, that's from the affidavits and the plea deals, etc. Now we know through TYT Investigates story, Jonathan Larson did a wonderful job here, through the tax records, that a group associated with the fellowship, and John's gonna break that down for you in a second, is apparently paying for those Russians to come here. Why? I mean, that's a fascinating question, and how deep do those ties go? So let's now dive into that.
Exactly, and I want to explain briefly for those who might not follow what the National Prayer Breakfast is and why it's important. Because in this particular case, it's important because of the connection with Torshin and Maria Butina. But in a larger sense, going back a very long time, it has been an extremely influential event that both Democrats and Republicans attend, including presidents, that has this sort of veneer of bipartisanship and respectability and mainstreamness, but is in fact sort of a den of corruption of different forms, which we're gonna break down. The breakfast is run by the Fellowship Foundation, sometimes known internally as the Family, a secretive Christian group led by what's his first name?
Doug Coe.
Doug Coe, for decades before his death in 2017, although this organization goes back many, many decades. The annual event has become an international influence peddling bazaar where foreign dignitaries, religious leaders, diplomats, and lobbyists jockey for access to the highest reaches of American power. Because as we said, presidents go, senators go, congressmen go, influential people in business and all of that as well. And so meanwhile, around the prayer breakfast, outside of that specific event, that's just one event on the first Thursday of February, there's a week-long lobbying festival. There is oil industry hosting events, defense contractors, and all of that. So this is, by the way, coming from journalist Jeffrey Charlotte, who says, so you look at the list of foreign leaders who are coming again and again from around the world, they're there for access to American power, they're there to cut deals. He goes on to say, and he wrote a book, by the way, on this organization and the event, saying the National Prayer Breakfast is used to circumvent the State Department. They are arranging meetings with a real who's who of nasty figures. And so what's interesting is that this is such an important event that the people who attend will spend thousands or tens of thousands or even more dollars in attending. And so if an organization is paying to have Maria Butina and other influential Russians attend, that is significant because normally that has a significant price tag associated with it. So let's go into more of what was found. A July 2018 FBI affidavit said that an unnamed organizer of the breakfast helped Butina and Torshin get Russian guests into the breakfast. Federal tax filings show that a Seattle nonprofit called Leadership Development Seminars reported expenses connected to guests from Russia and other former Soviet bloc nations attending the breakfast from at least 2014 through 2017, the most recent year for which tax records are available. LDS, that organization we just mentioned, has strong ties to the Fellowship Foundation, including personnel, cooperation on the breakfast, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding. And going back quite some time, money flows both ways. And from LDS to the fellowship, in several of the years that was found, the only thing they were providing money for was for that fellowship and their breakfast.
Okay, so now let me again level set here. You got the fellowship, the family, whatever you want to call it, they do the prayer breakfast, okay? Then you got these guys, the leadership development seminars, let's just shorten it as LDS.
Which is unfortunate too, because the Mormons are LDS.
That's right, but they are not Mormons.
They're not part of that.
It's just that this group is also called LDS. Now, Doug Coe used to run the fellowship until he died in 2017. The person who runs LDS is Doug Burley. Doug Burley is Doug Coe's son-in-law. And the fellowship also apparently paid for some of his housing. Now, and they give hundreds of thousands of dollars back and forth to one another. Until about 2014, it's the fellowship mainly giving to LDS. Okay, to me that's a little bit more logical. They're apparently the bigger group. But then LDS turns around in 2013 and starts giving money to the fellowship. Where do they get that money? That's an interesting question that we don't have an answer for yet. They do have a public-facing website where they can collect money from sources that are not clear. So that'll be an interesting, and remember, there was a huge affidavit here where the FBI laid out the different problems with both the NRA and the fellowship and how they have Russians that have apparently, in a sense, infiltrated them. And so we might soon find out a lot more of these details. But for now, what TYT has found out is that Doug Burley's group, the LDS, in their tax records showed that they gave, for example, in 2017, $421,000, 644 on top, to work, quote, work in the former Soviet Union. We had 65 people from Russia, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan attend the National Prayer Breakfast in early February. And there's a lot of communication, and now some of it public. Doug Burley also talked to World Magazine about it, saying, and it seems to match up with the evidence in the affidavits and the plea deals, that they got 10 Russians into the National Prayer Breakfast in 2017. Then Torshin asked for a meeting with Trump. And all of these guys are looking to influence American politicians. Now look, at this point, if you say, look, I got it, the Republicans are massively compromised by the Russians in a lot of different ways. There's Dana Rohrabacher, there's obviously famously Donald Trump and all of his underlings, Manafort, et cetera, et cetera. But why are Democrats going to this?
Yeah.
And so wait, I thought it was about prayer. I didn't really think that, but that's what they claim, right? But in reality, no, this is about deal making.
Yeah, it was about prayer until Bill Clinton at the prayer breakfast in 1998. I'm guessing right after his affair with Monica Lewinsky was revealed, people started protesting, boycotting it because it was Bill Clinton. Then some people early in the first Obama one mentioned, well, he might be a Muslim, so is that really something that we need to have at the prayer breakfast? So even the religious side of it has historically been, of course, pretty conservative and pretty challenging. But yeah, this is clearly not just about prayer. I think one thing from Jonathan's reporting to add that's I think interesting too is that Torshin himself reportedly directed Butina who should be the Russians invited in the Russian delegation. So they were handpicked Russians by Torshin that were invited by Butina.
Yeah, I think that this does not. So Burley is a longtime fan of Russia, and to be fair to him, so he speaks Russian. He's gone there. He goes about 3-4 times a year. So he's interested in this country. Some people are interested in France, and some are interested in China. So I think there's something legitimate there because it goes back a long time. On the other hand, if you're inviting Russian oligarchs to meet with top-level American officials and you're financing that, that is problematic. I mean, you take any country and put that in. What if he brought in top-level, instead of oligarchs, mullahs from Iran and said, you know what, I'm gonna circumvent the whole State Department, the whole process, and I'm gonna pay for the mullahs to come here and influence both the Republican and Democratic politicians. Everybody would go, that's totally unacceptable.
Well, and it might theoretically be one thing if it was considered to be a weird, extreme event where weird, extreme people go. But if it's considered just, normal, no, you go there. If you're the president, you go there. It's totally normal, totally cool, you should be there. Creating this obligation, whether real or imagined, that everyone needs to go. So I was reading up a little bit more on the origins of this organization. In the very beginning, it was created by a man who apparently got a vision from God that American Christianity was focused too much on this idea of poor people and doing stuff for poor people. That's a waste of time. Jesus is strong and he wants you to track down the key individuals, powerful, influential people, get them to support you, and then they will set up a system and laws that benefit Christianity and create what has been termed trickle-down Christianity or trickle-down evangelicalism. That is not a middle of the road form of Christianity.
No,
that's not something that, hey, maybe some Republicans, some Democrats could get on with that. Although they have.
And it also has,
I'm going to get to the Democrats in a second.
It conveniently has the name National Prayer Breakfast, which is the softest, most benign name, and everything sneaks under that radar.
Yeah.
Although when its nickname is the family would like to meet you now.
Yeah.
I'd be a little careful. Anyway, so but on to super important stuff. So first of all, the question is why are Democrats going here? Okay, the Republicans might be compromised, but why are top-level Democrats going to support evangelical right-wing Christians and their agenda about trickle-down Christianity, trickle-down economics, and it's these people are clearly right-wing. I mean, we're really having a conversation about how it's bipartisan. No, it is the Democrats then helping support a right-wing frame, even if they weren't involved with the Russians. Now, it's about to get way worse in a second as well. But first, on this Burley guy and what he thinks of Jesus, okay? First, he said that back in 2017, now at this point, Donald Trump is president, remember? He's quoted by the Russian Evangelical Alliance that there will soon, in a matter of 3 months, he said, be, quote, a breakthrough between Russia and the USA that is about to occur. Now, how does he know that? What does he know that we don't know? Well, that's an important and interesting question. So now, why did I bring up Jesus? He has also said this, Burley, to give you a sense of who this guy is, the one who paid for the Russians to come here through LDS. When challenged about it in March of 2018, he said, there's big time collusion. It's the Russians and Jesus. That's the collusion. Okay, so Ted Lieu, Chris Coons, all the other Democrats that are going in the past, Amy Klobuchar is gone, Kirsten Gillibrand, Hillary Clinton.
Al Franken went.
That's right. So are you guys going to continue to go with a guy who thinks that he's talking to Jesus and that Jesus wants him to collude with the Russians, and then he has information we don't have, and he's paying for Russians to meet with top officials? And what do you want to take part in that process? That's crazy. But wait, there's one last part, and this is earlier stories that the TYT Investigates broke. So Representative Bob Aderholt is a Republican from Alabama, and the fellowship has paid for his overseas trips. So where did he go? Well, one of the things that he did was he went to Ukraine and met with Rinat Akhmetov, okay? That is a client of former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort. So that's Manafort's oligarch. So now the fellowship is paying for Republican congressmen to go talk to Russian oligarchs. Why? And why are Democrats participating in this? So it's TYT Investigates' job to bring you the facts, and they have. And I think this is fascinating now that we know that there's a direct financial relationship. We know one side of the relationship, which is that the LDS is paying for the Russians. Where is LDS getting their money? We don't know that yet, okay? And I'm very curious about that. So now to the Democrats, I mentioned Ted Lieu, and let's be fair, TYT Investigates went and asked Lieu about participation here, and his chief of staff, Mark Savesco, gave this quote: if this is all true, the payments are verified and this is true and factual, of course the congressman would be concerned about it, and we believe transparency is more important, as we did with the NRA, and if there's some Russian influence on the National Prayer Breakfast, we want to know about it. Well, that makes sense. We all want to know about it. And finally, I mentioned those the trips that the Republican legislators are taking on the dime of the Fellowship Foundation. One of the things they go to do is to influence other governments to pass anti-gay legislation. Wow. Why would a Democrat support that group in any way, shape, or form? When you look at other countries' laws against LGBT members and citizens in their own countries, they're as bad as ours, and some far, far worse. Yeah. So to send people through this organization to argue against the dignity and human rights and sometimes the lives of gay people across the world. And Democrats go and validate that by going to this breakfast and saying, no, it's okay, it's wonderful, and all we're doing is praying, which is total nonsense. And you can see it in the facts here. So it's our job here at the Young Turks then to analyze it. And my analysis is no Democrat in their right mind should give any credibility to this organization. It appears to be toxic on several different fronts.
Well, and not faulting them now, but faulting them for going to the next prayer breakfast, because that was before Jonathan Larson's reporting uncovered all of this. So if you were Al Franken in 2016 and you went to the prayer breakfast because you didn't know that this was going on, I have to think that there was a lot of not knowing that this was going on, which is why this story is so interesting as well.
Maybe. It seems suspicious from the beginning.
Are you the Butina and Torshin thing? I mean, listen.
I'm saying
that's definitely
no. I'm saying even if you don't know about that, even if you don't care about that, even if you don't care about anything having to do with any Russian that's ever lived in the world, it seems weird. I think.
Well, so look, let me be in the middle here, which makes sense. So John is right. I never would have gone to the breakfast in the first place because I know that they're right wingers. Who are we kidding, right? And who are the Democrats kidding? They're not nonpartisan. They're not left wingers, and I wouldn't want to go and aid and abet their policy against the LGBT community, et cetera, right? Like Hillary Clinton has this flowery quote about Doug Coe and how wonderful he is to her. I'm sure he was. Okay, but that doesn't help fix any of the other things. But to Michael's point here, now what do we know? Well, from earlier TYT investigative stories, we now know that they're paying for Republican congressmen to go to other countries and actively lobby against LGBT rights and their lives in a lot of cases. And now we know through the FBI and the special counsel that they were infiltrated by Maria Butina. That's a fact. And her handler is one of the top Russian oligarchs, Torshin. That's a fact. Well, that's new. And now through TYT Investigates, we know another layer to it, which is that it turns out they were actually paying for the Russians to attend. So now that greatly enmeshes the National Prayer Breakfast with Russian oligarchs that clearly had an agenda. Again, best case scenario is they were useful idiots, and the Russians thought they're paying for us to come get all this influence and power with both Republicans and Democrats. How do we get this lucky? There are other worst case scenarios, but we'll see how that develops.
And something called the National Prayer Breakfast shouldn't be backed by a group like this. And if it is, then people should not go to the National Prayer, because it's not that. I mean, that's what I think the name is really deceptive, not just because it's a soft name, but because it leads people to think that this is somehow the president always goes, it's an official government function, when it is clearly anything but that.
Yeah, and the president normally does go.
Yeah.
And so, I agree with Michael again, let's give these folks a chance. I mean, I'd be really surprised if Ted Lieu and Kirsten Gillibrand continue to go to the breakfast. So let them absorb the report. Let's ask them about it, and then let them verify. Let them go through that whole process, and then we'll ask. And if they say no, you know what, fighting against LGBT rights across the world and paying for the Russians to come influence us, we think that's wonderful ideas. We really like it, and we'd like to stay. Okay, well then that's a different question.
And now we should ask them about it. I mean, now we should take this to them and go to the offices of these Democratic members of Congress and say, hey, now that this report exists, are you going to go to the next prayer breakfast, which I presume is next month? It's usually in February or March.
It is. Right? It's in early February. And Michael, you read our mind. And Emma Vigeland now is going to follow up and reach out to all those offices and ask them. And so we'll find out what their answer is. But it appears that this group is unconscionable from a progressive perspective, let alone the legal issues they have now that is going to also probably get revealed in the next month or two. We already know parts of it, as we just explained, and it could be even worse from the blacked out parts of the plea deals that are not yet public. The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.